The desert was quiet that morning, so still that even the wind seemed too tired to move the sand. The sun had just begun to climb over the rocky horizon when a small group of workers gathered near an old excavation site. They were searching for ancient pottery or maybe a few coins from forgotten travelers. Nothing unusual, just another long day in the heat. One of them spotted something odd buried in the sand, half covered by dust and small stones. It wasn't shiny or colorful, just a dull piece of metal sticking out of the ground. At first they thought it was an old pipe or maybe a part of a broken machine. Nobody cared much, but curiosity always wins against routine, so they dug around it, brushing away layer after layer of dry earth until the strange object came free. It was heavier than it looked, shaped like a chunk of metal molded by someone who didn't quite know what they were making. Its surface had faint markings, not letters or numbers, but tiny grooves that curved in a pattern, almost like veins under skin. When sunlight touched it, something inside the metal flickered like a faint pulse. The men laughed it off. "Just scrap," one of them said. Another joked that maybe it was from an old satellite that crashed years ago. Nobody believed it was anything valuable. By noon, everyone was ready to leave, tired from the heat. Only one man lingered. He couldn't explain why the object fascinated him. There was something different about it, something quiet yet alive. He wrapped it in an old cloth and carried it back to town in his truck. Back home, he placed the metal on his workbench. His small workshop smelled of oil and iron. He had always loved fixing old machines, radios, and motors. This piece felt like a mystery waiting to be solved. He washed the dust off and looked at it closely under a small lamp. The surface shimmered faintly, not smooth but full of patterns that seemed to shift under the light. When he ran his fingers along the grooves, they felt warm, even though the room was cool. He thought maybe it was made from a special alloy or something experimental. Perhaps some company had tested new equipment in the desert years ago, and this was part of it. That night, after dinner, he sat again in front of the relic, unable to stop thinking about it. Something about its presence made the room feel different, charged somehow as if the air itself had grown thicker. For several days he kept studying it. He measured the weight, took photos, and even tried to check for magnetic properties. Nothing made sense. It wasn't magnetic, yet his compass needle twitched whenever it got near. His tools would sometimes act strangely around it. Once his watch stopped working completely, then started again after he moved the metal away. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't want to be laughed at like the others at the site. But curiosity pushed him to keep digging for answers. He searched online for similar artifacts. He read about lost technologies, ancient devices, and even strange scientific experiments, but nothing matched what he had. One evening while he was preparing tea, a thunderstorm rolled in. The power flickered as lightning flashed outside his small home. He heard a faint humming sound from the workshop. Thinking maybe a loose wire was sparking, he rushed in. The relic was glowing softly, a deep silver light pulsing from within the metal like the beat of a slow heart. It wasn't bright enough to light the room, but it was alive in a way no object should be. He felt his chest tighten as he moved closer. The hum grew louder, not like a machine, but like a vibration through the air itself. He reached out, and the moment his fingers brushed it, the humming stopped. The glow faded. The workshop fell silent again, except for the rain outside. His tools were still, his heart was racing, and the relic looked just as dull as before. He stepped back, unsure if what he saw was real. To be sure, he checked the camera he had set up earlier for recording his tests. But when he played the footage, it showed nothing. The glow, the hum, everything was gone. It was as if the camera had stopped recording during that time. Even the files from the night before had disappeared. That frightened him. Machines don't erase themselves. He turned off the lights and sat in the dark, listening to the storm. The relic sat there on the table, silent and still, yet somehow he could feel its presence, like it was aware of being watched. Over the next few days, he tried not to think about it. He focused on his regular work, fixing radios and engines for neighbors. Yet every night his thoughts drifted back to the metal object. It seemed harmless, almost ancient, but the memory of that glow wouldn't leave his mind. One afternoon he took it outside to see how it looked under the sun. It reflected light oddly, never quite the same angle twice. He held it to his ear and thought he heard a faint ticking sound, too slow for a clock. The desert wind blew softly and he felt a strange calm, as if the relic was part of the land, something that had always been there, waiting to be found. He started keeping notes. writing down every small thing he noticed. The warmth of the surface, the faint hum during storms, the way tools acted strangely nearby, the camera losing data. It all sounded too strange to share, but he wanted a record just in case. One evening, he received a visit from one of the workers who had been at the dig site. The man was nervous. He said strange things were happening there since they removed the object. Equipment had started malfunctioning, and even GPS devices weren't working right. The man asked if he still had the metal. He nodded but didn't mention what he'd seen. The worker warned him to be careful, then left quickly as if afraid to stay too long. That night, he couldn't sleep. Every sound outside felt sharper. At around midnight, he heard a faint humming again. When he entered the workshop, the relic wasn't glowing, but the air around it shimmered slightly like heat rising from the sand. He whispered softly, not knowing why, as if speaking to a living thing. The hum faded again and everything fell quiet. He began to think maybe he was imagining it. Maybe he had been working too long alone. But then small things kept happening that couldn't be explained. His radio would turn on by itself, always on static. His phone battery would drain suddenly whenever he got too close to the relic. The compass on his shelf spun in circles one morning, even though there was no metal nearby except the object itself. One morning, he found the relic had moved slightly from where he'd left it. It wasn't far, just a few inches, but he was sure no one else had entered the workshop. He stared at it for a long time, a mix of fear and fascination tightening in his chest. He decided to take it to the local university. Maybe someone there could identify it, give him peace of mind. He carefully packed it in a wooden box and drove there the next day. The researchers looked at the metal piece, examined it, tapped it, and finally shrugged. They called it a decorative artifact, possibly from old mining equipment. Some even laughed, saying people in small towns often found treasures that turned out to be nothing. He tried explaining what had happened, the glow, the hum, the way electronics reacted, but no one took him seriously. Tired and embarrassed, he left the relic on their lab table and walked out. Later that evening, the university's power flickered. A faint burning smell filled one of the labs. Several computers had crashed. When the staff checked the room, they found the relic still on the table, completely unharmed, its surface faintly warm. They didn't call him back, and he didn't return to ask. But he knew something was different now. When he returned home, the silence felt heavier. He sat at his desk staring at the empty space where the relic once rested. His notes lay open beside him, pages full of observations that no one would ever believe. As the sun went down, a thought crossed his mind. What if the object wasn't man-made at all? What if it wasn't meant to be found? He closed his notebook, looked out at the desert stretching endlessly beyond his window, and whispered softly to himself, maybe some things are buried for a reason. Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying the dry scent of sand and something faintly metallic. Far away, lightning flickered on the horizon, and somewhere deep in the night, unseen by anyone, a faint silver glow pulsed beneath the desert floor, steady, patient, waiting. After that day at the university, the man tried to move on with life. He returned to his small house on the edge of town, surrounded by quiet streets and dry hills. Days went by, then weeks, and the desert heat began to fade into the cool winds of early winter. Still, he couldn't stop thinking about the relic. He told himself he should forget it. He even cleaned his workbench and threw away the old cloth that once covered the metal object. Yet every night before sleeping, he caught himself wondering what had happened to it. He had left it at the university, but something deep inside whispered that it wasn't gone. One evening, as he sat on the porch with a cup of tea, his phone buzzed. The message came from an unknown number. It only said, "You should come." No name, no address, but a second message followed with a location pin. It was the same university lab. He stared at the screen for a long time. His first thought was that it might be a mistake. But something told him to go. He grabbed his jacket and keys and drove through the empty streets, the night air humming softly through the open window. When he arrived, the building was dark except for a faint light in the back corridor. The door was unlocked. Inside, the smell of metal and burnt plastic hung in the air. As he stepped into the lab, he noticed the relic still on the table. No one else was around. The object looked different now, cleaner, as if someone had polished it. The grooves on its surface seemed deeper, glowing faintly with silver-blue light. He walked closer, feeling that same strange pressure in the air, the one that made his chest tighten. Then he noticed the wall. Several machines that had been connected to the relic were melted from the inside. The screens were dark, wires twisted like vines. He reached for his phone to record, but it froze. The screen turned black and wouldn't turn back on. He took a slow breath and whispered, "What are you?" The relic responded with a low hum. It wasn't loud, but it filled the room completely, vibrating through the floor, through the air, through him. For a moment the hum changed into something else, a faint rhythm almost like a heartbeat. He stepped back, afraid but unable to look away. Then, as suddenly as it began, the sound stopped. The glow faded and everything went quiet again. He left quickly, locking the door behind him. As he drove home, the thought repeated in his mind like a loop. It's alive. That night he couldn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table staring at the ceiling. The power flickered once, twice, then came back. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled softly. He glanced out the window and for a split second, he thought he saw a flicker of light moving across the desert, steady, pulsing, like the same glow he had seen before. The next morning, he called the university, but no one answered. Later that day, he learned through a neighbor who worked there that a small power failure had damaged several labs. No one mentioned the relic. It was as if the whole thing had been erased from official memory. He knew something wasn't right. Days later, two strangers came to his door. They weren't from the university. They wore plain clothes, polite but cold. They asked if he still had contact with the lab team. He said no, then they asked about the object he had found. He said it was left with the university, and that was true. They thanked him and left, but their questions stayed in his mind. How did they know about the relic? Why did they care? For the next few nights, he noticed a vehicle parked far down the street with its lights off. It never stayed long, but it returned every evening around the same time. He stopped opening his curtains at night. He felt watched, but he didn't tell anyone. Who would believe a story like his? A week later, the university called. The voice on the other end was shaky, hurried. The person didn't say their name, just whispered, "It's gone." Then the call cut off. He sat frozen in his chair. Gone? Did someone steal it, or did something else happen? He tried to forget again, to lose himself in work. But the silence in his house began to feel different, heavier. Every creak, every flicker of light made him tense. He would wake up at night feeling a faint vibration under his floorboards, like a distant hum buried deep underground. Then came the storm. It was late evening when the clouds gathered thick and low. The wind howled, rattling the windows. Lightning split the sky again and again, and the sound rolled across the desert like drums. The lights flickered once more, and then everything went black. He lit a candle and sat quietly, waiting for the power to return. Then from outside he saw something strange, a pale light glowing softly in the distance. It wasn't lightning. It was steady, almost beautiful, shimmering in the rain. He stepped out onto the porch, barefoot, letting the rain hit his face. The light was coming from the far end of the desert, near the excavation site where it had all begun. It pulsed slowly like it was breathing. His heart pounded. Every part of him wanted to run back inside, to close the door and forget. Yet something deeper pulled him forward. He grabbed a flashlight and started walking. The rain fell harder as he reached the edge of the desert. His shoes sank into the wet sand, but the glow ahead stayed constant, calling him silently. It wasn't far now. When he finally reached the spot, his flashlight went out. The glow was brighter now, rising from beneath the ground. He knelt down, brushing away the wet sand. His fingers found something smooth and metallic, warm to the touch despite the cold rain. It was the relic. Somehow it had returned. He fell back, staring at it in disbelief. The metal surface shimmered with that same pulsing light, but this time it was stronger. The patterns across its body were changing, moving like living veins. He whispered again, though he didn't know why. "What do you want?" The hum answered him again, deep and soft. The ground beneath him trembled slightly, not enough to frighten him, but enough to remind him that this thing was not lifeless. Then, just as before, the light began to fade. The hum grew weaker until the night was quiet once more. Only the sound of rain remained. He didn't touch it this time. He just stared for a long while, then slowly stood up and stepped back. The relic lay there, calm, unmoving, like it had been waiting for him. When the storm finally passed and the sky began to lighten, he returned home. wet and tired, but strangely calm. Something inside him had changed. He no longer felt the same fear, only a deep curiosity mixed with respect. The next morning he went back to the spot. The relic was gone again. Not a mark remained in the sand, not even a trace of where it had been. He stood there for a long time, the sun warming his face. Maybe it had never been meant to belong to anyone. Maybe it simply appeared where it wanted to, when it wanted to. As days turned into weeks, he went back to his normal life. The visitors stopped coming. The vehicle that used to park near his home disappeared. The world around him felt normal again, but inside, he knew nothing was the same. Sometimes, at night, when the wind blew through the desert, he thought he heard that low hum again, distant, fading in and out, like a song carried by the air. He never tried to find it again, not because he didn't want to, but because he understood something that words couldn't explain. Some things are not meant to be owned, not meant to be studied or controlled. Some things exist simply to remind humanity how little it truly understands. He returned to his simple work and quiet days. Yet once in a while, when a storm rolled across the desert, he would look out through the rain and swear he could see that faint, silver light again, somewhere far away, flickering softly, as if watching over him. And though he never touched it again, he carried its presence in his thoughts, in his dreams, and in the stillness of every quiet night that followed. Days turned into weeks, and life slowly settled into its quiet rhythm again. The man went back to repairing old machines, radios, and fans for his neighbors. On the surface, everything seemed normal. Yet deep inside, the memory of that night still echoed. The glow, the hum, the way the relic had seemed alive. He tried to push it away. Every time his mind wandered, he reminded himself, "It's gone." But something about the silence around him felt too deliberate, as if the world itself was pretending along with him. One morning, as he was fixing a radio, the doorbell rang. Standing outside was a young student, carrying a notebook and a bag full of papers. He introduced himself as someone from the same university where the relic had been taken. His voice trembled slightly as though he was unsure whether to speak at all. The man invited him in and offered tea. The student sat quietly for a few moments, then opened his notebook and said, "You were right. It wasn't just metal." Those words hung in the air. The man leaned back in his chair, unsure what to say. The student explained that after the night the relic disappeared, the university had shut down several labs for maintenance. But whispers spread among the staff. Computers had short-circuited, data files vanished, and even backup drives had been wiped clean. Some professors said it was a system error. Others said it was something else, something that interfered with every machine around it. The student pulled out a small photo. It was blurry, taken from a damaged camera, but the image showed the relic glowing faintly. Around it, objects on the table seemed to bend slightly as if the air itself was distorted. The man stared at the picture. The glow was exactly as he remembered. Soft, silver blue, pulsing like a heartbeat. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked quietly. The student hesitated. "Because they told us to destroy the samples," he said. But one of the researchers couldn't. He took part of it, a small fragment, and kept it hidden. The man's chest tightened. "A fragment?" The student nodded. "It's different now. It reacts when there's sound. When people speak near it, it vibrates." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The sound of the ticking wall clock filled the silence. The student looked nervous, glancing toward the window every few seconds, as if expecting someone to appear. Finally, the man said softly, "You shouldn't have brought this to me." The student smiled weakly. "I didn't bring it. I just wanted to warn you." He left soon after, leaving behind a small folded note. When the man opened it, it had only one line written in shaky handwriting. "It listens." That night, sleep refused to come. He kept replaying the student's words in his head. "It listens." He thought about the hum he'd heard, the way it had responded when he spoke. What if it had been more than a reaction? What if it had been learning? The next day, strange things began happening again. His radio, which had been broken, suddenly switched on by itself. The speakers crackled, and instead of music or voices, there was only static, then faint rhythmic pulses. It wasn't random noise. It had a pattern, slow and steady, like breathing. He unplugged the radio, but the sound continued for a few seconds, even after the power was off. He stood there, frozen, until it finally faded away. He decided to visit the university again, but when he arrived, the main building was closed. The security guard told him that certain sections had been shut down permanently after an accident during testing. No one was allowed to enter. On his way back, he stopped at a small roadside cafe. As he sat there, he overheard two people talking at a nearby table. One of them mentioned strange incidents at the old research site, power surges, electronics failing, and a rumor that the government had taken over the lab. The man kept quiet, pretending not to listen, but every word confirmed what he feared. They hadn't been able to control it. When he returned home, he found his front door slightly open. He stepped inside cautiously, calling out. No one answered. Nothing seemed stolen or broken, but something was different. The air felt thicker, heavier, like the quiet before a storm. On his table lay his old notebook, open to a blank page. In the middle of the page, written in faint silvery dust, were 3 words. It's not over. He froze, staring at the message. His hands trembled as he touched the page, but the dust smeared instantly, vanishing as if it had never been there. That night the hum returned. It was faint at first, coming from somewhere deep under the floor, then growing louder. He turned off every light and sat silently in the dark. The hum began to shift again, turning into that same rhythm, that same pulse. Then, for the first time, he heard something new. A whisper. Not a voice exactly, but something that felt close to one, like the echo of thoughts not his own. He couldn't understand the words. They were soft, distant, like a language without sound. Yet somehow he understood the feeling behind them. Awareness. The relic was not just reacting, it was reaching out. The next morning the hum was gone and everything looked ordinary again. He tried to tell himself he had imagined it. But deep down he knew better. Over the next few days he noticed subtle changes around him. His old tools began working more efficiently, even ones he hadn't repaired yet. His broken fan started spinning again. The lights in his house no longer flickered during storms. It was as if something invisible had fixed them. At first he felt relieved. Then he realized the truth. It was the relic's energy. Somehow its influence hadn't left him. He didn't tell anyone. Who would believe it? He just went about his daily life quietly, though every once in a while, he'd catch the faintest vibration in the walls, like a reminder that it was still there, somewhere close. One afternoon, as he walked through the marketplace, he noticed something strange. Several people's phones suddenly went dead. The digital clocks on shops froze. The hum of electric fans stopped mid-turn. Everyone looked around, confused. For 10 full seconds, silence filled the air. Complete, heavy silence. Then everything powered back on. He knew that feeling. It was the same stillness he had felt when the relic first awoke. That night he sat by the window staring at the distant desert. The stars shimmered faintly above the dunes, and somewhere out there, he imagined the relic lying buried again, breathing in the earth like some ancient creature waiting for its moment. He wondered if it had chosen him for a reason. Maybe he had touched it first because he was meant to, or maybe he had just been unlucky. Then a thought crossed his mind that made him sit up straight. What if the relic wasn't just reacting to him? What if it was connected to him now? He remembered the warmth he'd felt when he first touched it, the strange energy that had lingered. What if part of it had stayed with him? He turned off the light and looked at his hands in the dim moonlight. They looked normal. He laughed softly to himself, trying to brush off the thought. But as he leaned closer to the window, his reflection caught something. A faint silver shimmer that ran across his palm, disappearing as quickly as it appeared. He sat still for a long time, his breath shallow, staring at his hand. The hum returned, soft, gentle, almost comforting this time. He didn't run from it. He closed his eyes and listened. For the first time, it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like communication. Not in words, not in sounds, but in feelings, curiosity, patience, and something almost like trust. The relic wasn't angry. It wasn't dangerous. It was trying to understand. When morning came, he opened the door and stepped out into the cool air. The desert stretched endlessly before him, golden and silent. He felt a calm he hadn't felt in months. The relic, wherever it was, wasn't gone. It was simply resting, maybe even learning in its own way. He whispered softly, "You're not alone anymore." The wind carried his words away, gentle and warm. Far out in the desert, unseen by human eyes, a faint shimmer rippled under the sand, brief, alive, almost like an answer. The quiet days didn't last long. Just when he began to think life had returned to normal, the calm broke once again, this time in ways he couldn't have imagined. It started one morning when he received a letter with no return address. The paper looked official, stamped with a small emblem that didn't belong to any company or university he knew. The message was short, printed neatly. "We need to talk about what you found." There was no name, only a time and a location, an empty government building near the edge of town that hadn't been used in years. He stared at the paper for a long time. His first instinct was to ignore it, but a feeling deep inside told him that whatever this was, it wasn't going to disappear by pretending it didn't exist. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the desert an orange light, he drove to the location. The air was still, the streets empty. The building stood silent, windows dusty and cracked. He parked outside and stepped in through the open door. Inside, the hall was dimly lit by weak bulbs that buzzed softly. The floor echoed under his shoes. He called out, but no one answered. After a few moments, he heard footsteps from the other end of the corridor. Two men appeared, dressed in plain suits. Their faces were calm but unreadable. One of them held a small metal briefcase. "You're not in trouble," the first man said quietly. "We just need some information." The man stayed silent. He didn't trust them, not after everything that had happened. The second man opened the briefcase and turned it around. Inside was a photo of the Relic, the same one he had found in the desert. But this time it looked different. It had been placed in some kind of chamber, surrounded by lights and wires. The grooves on its surface glowed brightly, forming patterns that seemed almost alive. "We've been studying it," the man continued, "or at least trying to, but we can't get it to respond. It only reacted to you." The word sent a shiver through him. "Why me?" he asked. "That's what we're hoping to find out," the man replied. They asked him questions for nearly an hour: where he found it, how it behaved, what he felt when it glowed. He told them only what he remembered, nothing more. When he stood to leave, one of them said softly, "If it reaches out again, contact us." He didn't answer. He simply walked out into the night. As he drove home, the desert stretched out endlessly on both sides, silent and watchful. He couldn't shake the image of that glowing chamber. They had it again. They were trying to control it. That night, sleep refused to come. He sat by the window, staring into the dark, listening to the faint sounds of the night. Around midnight, his lights flickered once, then steadied. For a moment, he thought it was just another power fluctuation. Then he noticed the compass on his desk spinning slowly in circles. It was back. He felt it. Not in the air this time, but inside himself, like a quiet vibration running through his veins. He closed his eyes and focused. There was no sound, no hum, but a strange sense of awareness filled the room, as though someone or something was standing just out of sight. He whispered softly, "Are you here?" No answer came, yet he knew it was listening. The next morning, his phone rang. It was one of the men from the night before. His voice sounded tense. "Did you feel anything last night?" The man hesitated. "Why?" There was a pause, then the voice said, "Because the Relic disappeared again." He froze. "Disappeared?" "Yes, around midnight. Every system we had monitoring it failed. When the power came back, the containment room was empty." He hung up without replying. He already knew where it had gone. That evening, he went out into the desert once more. The sun had already dipped below the dunes, and the sky glowed faintly purple. As he walked, the wind carried soft grains of sand across his path, whispering like distant voices. He didn't have to search long. In the same place where he had found it months ago, the sand shimmered faintly under the moonlight. He knelt down, brushing the surface gently. His fingers met something smooth and warm. It was there, waiting for him. He sat beside it for a long time, staring at the soft glow pulsing through its surface. This time he didn't touch it. He only spoke. "I know you came back," he said quietly. "But why?" There was no sound, only a faint vibration under his hand, like a reply without words. He took a slow breath. "They're trying to use you, to understand you, maybe even to control you. You shouldn't have gone to them." The light flickered once, twice, then steadied, brighter than before. He felt something stir inside his mind, not like a thought of his own, but something shared. An image, faint and quick, of stars endless and distant, of silence and time. Then it faded, leaving him trembling. It wasn't just a machine. It was something far older, far more aware than anything humans had built. He whispered, "You don't belong here, do you?" The glow dimmed slowly, as if in agreement. For hours he sat there in silence, watching the relic breathe light into the night air. When dawn began to break, he stood and stepped back. The relic pulsed once more, and in a soft shimmer, sank slowly into the sand until only the top edge was visible. Then even that disappeared, leaving the ground smooth and untouched. He felt a strange calm. It wasn't fear anymore, it was understanding. It didn't want harm. It wanted peace. It wanted distance. When he returned home, he found his power restored, his devices working perfectly. Even the compass on his table pointed true north again. Everything seemed normal. Yet deep inside, he knew the story wasn't over. 2 days later, the same plain car appeared outside his house. The two men stepped out again, looking more uneasy than before. "It's gone again," one of them said. "We think it came back here," he didn't deny it. "It was here," he said softly. "But it left." "You should stop looking for it," the man shook his head. "That's not possible. We can't just stop. We've seen what it can do." He looked at them carefully. "Then you've also seen that it doesn't want to hurt anyone. It's only protecting itself." The men exchanged glances. "You don't understand. It's not just a relic, it's energy beyond anything we've known. If it can think, we need to know how." He sighed. "Sometimes knowing too much is the same as losing everything." They didn't reply. After a moment, they left quietly, their car disappearing down the dusty road. That night, as he sat outside under the stars, the desert looked peaceful again. A soft wind brushed past him, carrying the smell of dry earth and faraway rain. He felt a deep connection to the silence, a quiet trust between himself and the unseen. He realized something that made his heart feel heavy but calm at the same time. The relic hadn't just found him by accident. It had chosen him, not to use him, but to understand him, to see what kind of beings humans were. Maybe it had judged the world and decided it wasn't time yet. He looked up at the stars and whispered, "If you ever come back, I'll be here." Far away, across the horizon, a faint silver flicker appeared for just a second, like a heartbeat in the sky. Then it vanished into the dawn. The man smiled softly. For the first time in months, he felt no fear. Whatever the relic was, it wasn't an enemy. It was something ancient and alive, something that carried its own kind of wisdom, one that humans were only beginning to glimpse. As he went inside and turned off the light, the faint hum followed him once more, gentle, peaceful, almost like a lullaby from the stars themselves. After that night, something inside him changed forever. He no longer looked at the world the same way. The noise of the city, the traffic, the endless talk about technology and progress, it all felt too small, too loud, too shallow. He had seen something that went beyond human understanding, something ancient that didn't speak in words but still managed to say everything. He stopped talking about the relic to anyone. The government men never came back after that last visit. Perhaps they had realized it was beyond their control, or maybe they had decided to keep silent, to pretend none of it had ever happened. Either way, he was fine with it. He spent most of his days in quiet work, fixing old radios, helping neighbors, walking the dry edges of the desert. But deep inside, he could still feel a faint hum that never truly left him. It was like a memory of the relic, soft and distant yet always present, like a heartbeat in the silence. One evening, he sat outside on his porch, sipping tea as the sky turned from gold to deep blue. The stars began to appear one by one, blinking gently. He thought of the relic again, wondering where it had gone. Did it still exist under the sand, waiting? Or had it returned to the sky, to the same place it came from? The question followed him everywhere. It wasn't fear anymore. It was curiosity mixed with quiet respect. He had stopped trying to solve it. Now he simply wanted to understand what it meant. A few days later, something strange began happening again. The animals around the area, birds, stray dogs, even insects, started behaving oddly. The birds flew in perfect circles at dusk. The dogs gathered at the edge of the desert, howling at the horizon. Even the wind carried a low vibration, steady and deep. That night, the sky looked different. It wasn't just stars anymore. A faint arc of light stretched across the horizon, moving slowly like a thin river made of silver dust. He felt it again, the same soft pull inside his chest. It wasn't frightening, only familiar. The relic was calling. Without thinking much, he took a flashlight, some water, and walked into the desert once again. The sand felt cool under his shoes, and the wind carried the scent of distant rain. He walked for what felt like hours, guided only by that faint inner feeling, until he reached the same spot where he had once seen it disappear. The ground glowed faintly. He stopped, standing in silence. For a long time, nothing happened. Then the sand began to shift. A soft circle of light appeared, widening slowly. From within it, the relic rose once more, smooth, glowing, silent. But it wasn't the same as before. Its surface looked cracked like glass under pressure. The light it gave off was uneven, flickering. Something was wrong. He knelt down carefully, touching the edge. It was warm but trembling, as though struggling to stay alive. He whispered softly, "What happened to you?" There was no sound, but suddenly his mind filled with images again, brief flashes that weren't his own. He saw tall towers of stone, a sky filled with lights and beings not human yet not hostile. Then he saw fire, dust, and silence. The vision ended as quickly as it began, leaving him trembling in the dark. He realized the relic wasn't just an object. It had a memory. It had lived through something terrible, a war perhaps, or a fall of its own kind. And now it had come back not for revenge, but for refuge. He stayed beside it, speaking softly, even though he didn't know if it could understand him. "You don't have to hide anymore. You're safe here." The glow steadied slightly and the trembling eased. It was like it could sense the calm in his voice. For a few moments, everything around him felt peaceful again. The night air still. The stars bright, the sound of his own breathing slow and steady. Then, in the distance, a faint rumble broke the silence. He turned quickly. Far on the horizon, a line of lights was moving toward him. Vehicles, maybe 10 or 12, kicking up dust as they came. He understood at once. Someone had been tracking the energy signal. The relic's return had not gone unnoticed. He stood up, heart pounding, and looked down at the glowing object. "They're coming," he whispered. "You have to go." The light flickered, uncertain. It was weak, too weak to disappear again on its own. He made a decision he didn't fully understand. He placed both hands on its surface and closed his eyes. The moment his skin touched it, a wave of warmth spread through his body. It wasn't pain, but it was powerful, like being inside a storm made of light. He saw visions again, clearer this time. A planet made of gold light, endless oceans, cities that floated above the clouds. Then the image shifted, a giant explosion, everything breaking apart, silence falling. He realized what it was trying to say. It wasn't just a relic. It was a remnant of a lost world, the last memory of something that once lived among the stars. When he opened his eyes, the vehicles were closer now. He could see the red lights flashing. There was no time left. He pressed his hand harder against the relic. "Go," he said softly. "You don't belong here." The relic pulsed once, then again, brighter than before. The ground began to hum and the air shimmered like heat waves. The light spread outward, washing over the sand in gentle ripples. The vehicles stopped. The engines cut out one by one, silenced by something unseen. For a few seconds, the desert glowed brighter than daylight. Then all at once, the light folded inward, collapsing into a small silver point that blinked once and vanished into the sky. He fell to the ground, breathless and shaking. The sand was warm under him, but the air was cool again. When he looked up, the vehicles were still there, the people frozen in place, staring silently at the empty space where the relic had been. One of them shouted, "What happened? Where is it?" He didn't answer. There was nothing to say. The relic was gone, and this time he knew it would never come back. The men argued among themselves, setting up scanners, trying to find traces of energy, but everything came up blank. It was as if the thing had never existed. After a while, they packed up and left, their engines roaring away into the distance, leaving him alone again in the quiet desert. He sat there for a long time, watching the stars fade as morning began to break. He felt tired but not sad. It was a strange kind of peace, the kind that comes after understanding something you can never explain. When the first sunlight touched the sand, he whispered, "Thank you." He didn't know who he was thanking, the relic, the universe, or the quiet truth that had changed his life forever. But he meant it. Days passed, then weeks. The desert returned to its calm self. No more strange lights, no more vibrations. Just the sound of wind and the endless horizon. Yet sometimes, when the nights were perfectly still, he could still feel a faint hum deep in his chest. A reminder that something ancient had once trusted him, even for a moment. Life went on. He never told anyone what really happened that night. When people asked, he simply said the desert had its own secrets and not all of them wanted to be found. But every evening, before going to bed, he would step outside and look up at the sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of human eyes, a small silver glow drifted quietly among the stars. He didn't know where it went, or if it would ever remember him, yet somehow he believed it did. Because once you've shared a moment of truth with something that carries the memory of the stars, you never really lose it. It stays inside you, soft, wordless, eternal. As the wind whispered through the dry grass, he smiled faintly. The world around him had gone back to ordinary, but he knew better. Somewhere in the silence between heartbeats, the relic still lived, watching, waiting, guarding the stories humans had yet to write. And though the world might never understand what truly happened in that desert, he carried it quietly like a secret gift, a reminder that even the smallest things, the ones we call primitive, may hold the power to change everything we think we know about life, about time, and about ourselves. Months passed quietly after the relic vanished into the sky. Life settled back into its usual rhythm, but nothing truly felt the same. He went back to repairing old machines, tending his garden, and walking through the market like before, yet inside, a piece of him remained somewhere beyond the stars. People in the town often spoke about strange things they had seen that night, the sudden light that turned the desert silver, the tremor that followed, and the silence that came after. Some said it was a military test. Others claimed it was a meteor. But he said nothing. He simply smiled and said the desert had its own way of showing beauty. He had learned to keep the truth inside him, not out of fear, but out of respect. The relic hadn't wanted attention, and now that it was gone, it deserved peace. Still, every evening he would sit outside his house, cup of tea in hand, eyes tracing the horizon where the stars began to appear. Sometimes, the faint hum returned, a soft vibration that passed through the wind like a half-remembered song. It never lasted long, but it was enough to remind him that it hadn't been a dream. One night, while sitting under the open sky, he noticed something new. A small plant had begun to grow near the spot in the sand where the relic had first appeared. The desert wasn't known for growing much besides thorn bushes, but this plant looked different. Its leaves were silver green, and they glowed faintly under the moonlight. He knelt down, touching the soil gently. It was warm, not from the sun, but from something beneath. He smiled softly, whispering, "You left something behind, didn't you?" He began visiting that spot daily, watering the plant with what little water he could spare. Day by day it grew stronger, taller, and more vibrant. Soon it stood nearly at his chest, its leaves shining like tiny mirrors that caught the morning light. People started noticing. A few travelers stopped by, asking about the strange glowing plant. He simply told them, "It's a reminder that even the desert can heal." But he knew it was more than that. It was proof that the relic hadn't just left. It had planted something of itself, something living, something connected. Weeks turned into months, and the plant bloomed. The flowers were unlike anything on Earth, soft white petals with faint golden veins running through them. When the wind passed, they released a gentle shimmer like dust made of light. Birds began nesting nearby, and even the harsh desert wind seemed calmer around that place. He realized the relic's final act wasn't escape. It was renewal. It had come not to conquer, but to seed life, to leave behind a memory of its own world. One evening, as the sun dipped low, he saw a group of officials arrive in black vehicles again. They approached the plant cautiously, cameras and instruments in hand. He watched quietly from a distance. They took readings, samples, and notes. One of them approached him and asked, "Do you know when this started growing?" He nodded. "Some months ago. Do you know what it is?" The man asked. He smiled faintly. "Maybe it's just life finding its way." The official frowned, clearly unsatisfied with the vague answer, but said nothing more. They left soon after, carrying their samples, whispering among themselves. Days later, news spread quietly. The samples they took had baffled scientists. The plant cells didn't match any known Earth species. It had no genetic structure that could be classified. Some said it was a hybrid. Others said it was impossible. The government soon sealed the area, putting up fences and warning signs. He didn't fight it. He simply watched from afar. The plant kept growing behind the fence, untouched, beautiful, alive. Then one night something happened again. The desert lit up once more, but not with blinding light. This time it was soft, slow, and warm, like dawn stretching across the sand. The plant shimmered, and from its blossoms, tiny glowing seeds began to drift upward, carried gently by the wind. He watched them rise, dozens of them, floating higher and higher until they became specks of silver in the night sky. They looked like stars returning home. He felt tears well in his eyes, not from sadness, but from something deeper. Gratitude. He whispered, "You're free now." The next morning, when the officials came back, the plant was gone. Only smooth sand remained, untouched, as if nothing had ever grown there. They searched, scanned, dug, but found nothing. He knew they wouldn't. It had completed its purpose. After that night, he began writing everything he remembered, not as a report or a confession, but as a story. He wrote about the night he found the relic, the light it carried, the fear and wonder it brought, and how it changed him. He filled notebook after notebook, describing every detail he could recall, the sounds, the smells, the strange calmness he felt when he understood it wasn't here to harm. He never planned to publish it. He just wanted the memory to live somewhere beyond his mind. He wanted someone someday to find it and know that something extraordinary once touched this small corner of Earth. Years passed. His hair turned gray, his steps slower, but the spark in his eyes remained the same. Children in the village grew up hearing small parts of his story. They called him the man who saw the desert glow. Some laughed, some believed, but he never corrected anyone. He had learned that truth didn't always need to be proven. It only needed to be felt. Then one summer evening, something beautiful happened again. As he sat outside watching the sunset, a faint silver light appeared in the distance, hovering just above the horizon. It wasn't bright enough to frighten anyone, but clear enough for him to recognize. He smiled. "So you came back." The light pulsed once, slow and gentle, almost like a greeting. Then it faded into the sky, leaving a single streak of silver behind. He knew this was goodbye. Not in a sad way, but in a peaceful one, like an old friend who stops by one last time to say thank you. That night he slept better than he had in years. He dreamed of stars, of quiet oceans made of light, and of a voice, not in words but in feelings, whispering softly, "You understood." When the morning sun rose, the desert looked different again. A single white flower had grown near his porch, small but glowing faintly in the sunlight. He smiled when he saw it. He picked up his old notebook and opened it to the last page. With a calm hand, he wrote the final line. Some things may look primitive, but the truth is they're far beyond what we can imagine. And sometimes they choose to remind us that even in silence, the universe is watching and it remembers kindness. He closed the notebook, placed it on his desk, and looked out at the endless horizon one last time. The wind whispered softly across the sand, carrying the same peaceful hum he had known years ago. Somewhere beyond sight, among the stars, a faint light shimmered once, then disappeared into forever. The desert returned to silence, but not emptiness. It held a story now, one that would live quietly in the heart of anyone who ever stood there long enough to listen.